Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive into one of the most surprising and thrilling discoveries in the world of rare coins, a story that continues to capture the imagination of collectors, treasure hunters, hobbyists, and anyone fascinated by how a tiny piece of copper-coated zinc can suddenly become an object of massive fortune. And today we're exploring the incredible case of the 1993 D1 cent coin that has astonished experts, shocked auction bidders, and dominated numismatic discussions for years because of the extraordinary errors and rare production anomalies that have pushed its speculative value in collectors' markets into the unbelievable range of $21 million. A figure that sounds impossible for a coin minted in the billions, and yet becomes entirely plausible once you dig deep into the hidden layers of mistakes, misstrikes, variations, die imperfections, planchet defects, double punching possibilities, wrong metal rumors, striking pressure inconsistencies, off-center patterns, and experimental production quirks that have all been whispered about by collectors and gradually woven into the legend surrounding this particular year and mint mark. And as we welcome you into this journey meant to engage and captivate you just like you were holding a mysterious coin in your hand and wondering if the next unbelievable treasure is hiding in your pocket change, we unravel everything that makes the 1993 D1 cent coin such a phenomenon, beginning with the basic reality that billions of these coins were produced at the Denver Mint during a period when the United States Mint was transitioning through technological and equipment updates, which sometimes meant dies wore out more quickly, alignment systems needed recalibrations, and quality control teams were stretched thin across massive production runs, making it far more likely for tiny mistakes to slip through unnoticed, mistakes that are now magnified into multi-million-dollar value drivers for the few surviving examples displaying dramatic or even subtle anomalies that transform an ordinary coin into a priceless artifact. And among the most talked about issues is the possibility of double die obverse or double die reverse errors, situations where the die used to strike the image on the coin was engraved twice in slightly misaligned positions, creating doubling effects on key details of Lincoln's profile, the date, the mint mark, or the lettering. And although official documentation does not confirm the widespread presence of such doubling in 1993 D-cents, multiple collectors have reported finding faint or partial doubling, sparking debate over whether certain elusive strikes with full, clear doubling exist. If they do, such pieces could easily command astronomical prices because any major double die from the 1990s is exceptionally scarce. And when a decade-known error is nearly non-existent yet undeniably possible, it fuels a dramatic increase in demand, hype, and speculative value, especially for coins that appear to show even the slightest deviation from the standard design. And another factor feeding into the legendary value is the ongoing rumor of wrong planchet strikes, moments when a coin meant for one denomination accidentally ends up struck on a metal blank intended for another coin, such as a dime planchet or even a foreign coin blank. And although no officially certified wrong planchet 1993 D-cent has surfaced, collectors speculate that rare rejected test blanks or transitional planchets might have made their way into the presses during high-speed production phases, giving rise to ultra-lightweight or off-color versions of the penny that would instantly become multi-million-dollar rarities because wrong metal errors from this era are nearly impossible to replicate intentionally and thus extremely coveted. And then there are the strike pressure anomalies, situations where the pressure used to imprint the coin image was either too low or too high, causing weak strikes, overly sharp strikes, stretched rims, or distorted edges that sometimes also pull interior lettering off alignment and produce bizarre-looking details only noticeable under magnification, and with Denver's machinery at the time, known to undergo frequent recalibration cycles. Some specialists argue that the chance of spectacular misstrike patterns is not only possible, but probable, and that hidden in someone's jar of old pennies could be a phantom perfect example of such an anomaly valued far beyond ordinary estimates, especially because collectors often treat pressure-related striking variations as highly desirable when they create visual oddities that are unique to their specific die and batch. And we cannot forget the possibility of significant die cracks, those jagged, raised lines that appear on coins when a die fractures slightly, but continues to be used, creating lightning-like marks across Lincoln's portrait or the reverse building and large dramatic die cracks can be extremely collectible because they serve as a sort of fingerprint proving the exact moment of production error within a chaotic minting process. And if a coin from 1993 D shows a die crack running through critical design elements or forming shapes that resemble letters or symbols, its value can skyrocket because collectors love pieces that stand out visually and feel like accidents of fate frozen forever in metal. And then there is the mint mark itself, the small d that designates Denver, which has long been a focal point for error hunters because the mint mark used to be punched by hand decades earlier, and although by the 1990s it was integrated into the die, anomalies could still occur thanks to die fatigue, lubrication issues, metal flow problems, and small movements in the press, causing distortions of the mint mark, such as filled mint marks, tilted mint marks, elongated mint marks, or mint marks that look doubled or tripled due to the way the metal spread during the strike. And while many of these distortions are minor and often overlooked, certain specimens could feature mint mark variations so pronounced that they become instantly recognizable and therefore intensely valuable as unique collectible types. And what further elevates the mystique of the 1993 decent is the sheer rarity of confirmed premium-grade examples that survive in near-perfect condition because cents from the early 1990s were aggressively circulated, tossed in drawers, scraped in pockets, exposed to moisture, subjected to corrosion, and generally treated as disposable, meaning that almost no flawless or high-end uncirculated examples remain, and in markets where condition and rarity combine to determine value. A perfectly preserved example with an error becomes an object of fierce competition at auctions where deep-pocketed collectors are willing to gamble huge amounts on the belief that they may be acquiring one of the only known survivors of a significant mint anomaly. And that belief alone can inflate speculative value into the tens of millions, especially when combined with rumors that at least one elite private buyer is actively searching for the perfect 1993 D-era piece and is prepared to pay nearly any amount to secure it. And then comes the factor of micro-variations that can appear during the die polishing process, when mint workers attempt to buff out imperfections on the die surface but accidentally remove or distort tiny design elements, leading to cents with unusually thin letters, abnormally shaped numbers, or strange recessed areas that do not match standard examples. And these small differences, though subtle, are extremely significant to specialists who obsess over every microscopic detail, and when compounded with other anomalies like misalignment, incomplete lettering, ghosting effects behind Lincoln's head, or unusual metal flow lines, they create the type of coin that becomes mythologized as a once-in-a-generation error. And the legend grows even more when stories circulate about a supposed batch of early 1993 D-strikes that may have used dyes with experimental polishing compounds or trial surfaces, creating coins with unusual sheen, texture, or finish unlike normal circulation strikes. And although these claims are unverified, the very possibility adds fuel to the hype and drives collectors to inspect every 1993 D-cent they encounter with obsessive intensity, hoping to discover the next multi-million-dollar anomaly. The next 1984 1-cent USA coin today as we dive into one of the most astonishing and captivating tales in the world of rare coins, a story that grips collectors, treasure hunters, and curious minds alike. Because today we explore the unbelievable saga of the 1984 1-cent coin that is said to be worth an extraordinary $17 million due to a series of mysterious, dramatic, and highly unusual minting errors that transformed an ordinary copper-plated zinc penny into a legendary piece of numismatic lore. And as we unravel this fascinating journey, we'll walk through the errors, mistakes, overlooked anomalies, production oddities, and incredible possibilities that contributed to the belief that such a coin could command an unimaginable value, weaving together history, minting science, collector psychology, rarity principles, rumors, theories, and the mesmerizing chain of events that elevate a humble 1-cent coin into a jaw-dropping multi-million-dollar treasure. So settle in as we embark on a detailed, immersive exploration packed with intrigue, suspense, and revelations that keep coin lovers glued to their screens. Because this is not just about a small round piece of metal, but about the extraordinary forces that make certain coins ascend into the realm of fortune, mystery, and legendary worth. beginning with how the 1984 minting year itself became a hotbed for unusual occurrences that slipped through quality control and coin processing channels, leading to a range of die errors, double dies, misstrikes, planchet abnormalities, metal inconsistencies, and design distortions that contributed to an entire aura of unpredictability surrounding the pennies of that year. And among this batch of coins, the one we are focusing on is believed to have been struck during a moment of transition when the mint machinery suffered from misalignment, combined with a rare malfunction affecting the pressure and angle of the strike, producing a series of overlapping impressions so subtle and yet so significant that experts say they could only have occurred in a brief window, so narrow it might have lasted mere seconds, a moment where the equipment deviated from standard functioning, resulting in one of the most elusive double-die obverse scenarios ever discussed among collectors, with doubling visible around the date, the lettering, and particularly the word Liberty, which appeared to have been stretched, shadowed, and partially re-engraved by a second strike that didn't perfectly overlap the first, giving the coin a ghost-like doubling effect that is so crisp yet so strangely positioned that specialists consider it a once-in-a-lifetime error unlikely to ever be replicated in precisely the same manner. And adding to this, theories suggest the planchet itself may have been improperly prepared, slightly under-annealed, or affected by uneven copper plating that caused certain regions of the surface to expand differently under pressure, amplifying the distortions and creating micro-ripples across Lincoln's portrait that are visible under magnification but virtually impossible to attribute to normal wear, implying a deep minting anomaly unique to that coin and providing further evidence that it stands apart from any regular strike. But the story deepens even more with fascinating speculation surrounding the reverse as well, as collectors claim that subtle signs of rotated die error can be detected if one examines the alignment between the obverse and reverse carefully, noticing that the orientation seems marginally off from the standard upright position, not enough to be classified as a dramatic rotated die error, but enough to mark it as a rare transitional anomaly potentially caused by instability in the die collar during production. And this seemingly small imperfection becomes dramatically valuable when combined with the extraordinary obverse doubling and possible plating irregularities for when a coin carries multiple independent errors that appear to have originated at the mint under rare and fleeting conditions. Its uniqueness skyrockets, its story becomes more compelling, and its desirability among serious collectors grows enormously, eventually pushing its perceived value into the millions, particularly when rumors begin circulating that only one such coin is known or believed to exist, transforming it from a mere curiosity into a mythical treasure that embodies the ultimate dream for coin hunters who sift through change, coin rolls, estate sales, and old collections hoping to stumble upon a miraculous gem like this one. And as the legend of this 1984 error penny spread across collecting communities, online forums, auction circles, and numismatic conferences, the enthusiasm surrounding it expanded as well, fueling speculation that the coin's rarity wasn't just due to its errors, but also due to a rumor that the coin may have been part of a fleeting experimental adjustment cycle inside the mint where technicians tested new pressure calibrations or replaced components of the press. And if such experimentation truly occurred, the coin would have been struck during an unstable transitional moment where multiple variables shifted simultaneously, a highly unusual environment that could indeed produce a coin with such unmatched inconsistencies. And although no official documentation confirms these internal adjustments, the absence of information only added to the mystery, encouraging enthusiasts to construct elaborate theories about how this one penny narrowly escaped destruction, bypassed quality inspection, and entered circulation or private handling without being detected by mint officials, which elevates the sense of forbidden rarity. Because when a coin appears that theoretically shouldn't exist, its myth grows exponentially, pushing collectors to imagine the unlikely chain of circumstances that allowed it to survive. And in the world of collectibles, mystique itself plays a monumental role in perceived value, meaning that the more questions surround a coin, the more interest it generates, and the more interest it generates, the more competitive collectors become, which is exactly how the rumor value of $17 million eventually attached itself to this coin, not necessarily because of confirmed sales or empirical pricing, but because of the perfect storm created by rarity, mystery, curiosity, error, complexity, and the irresistible allure of owning something that no one else on the planet possesses, something that represents both a historical accident and an artistic oddity, something born from the unpredictability of human and machine interaction inside a minting facility that otherwise strives for perfection but occasionally slips in the most fascinating ways, creating anomalies that are pure gold for the right collector. And as we continue exploring the layers of this extraordinary tale, we must also consider the psychological momentum that pushes certain coins to values beyond logic. Because humans are drawn to treasure stories, to the idea that a tiny overlooked object could be worth millions, and this emotional component amplifies demand, drive, and competitive bidding among elite collectors who want not only the object, but also the story, the bragging rights, the historical significance, and the thrill of owning something that defies expectations, which is why stories of multi-million-dollar pennies continue to captivate the imagination, inspiring both veteran numismatists and beginners to coin hunting, reinforcing that even the smallest, simplest coin can hold unimaginable value under the right conditions, especially when those conditions involve overlapping errors, production quirks, metallurgical anomalies, misalignments, doubling, freak accidents in mint machinery, distortions, unusual plate behavior, rotational irregularities, and the possibility of undocumented mint experimentation, all converging in a single unique specimen that earns legendary status. And when collectors look at the 1984 penny believed to be worth $17 million, they don't just see metal and design. They see the culmination of probability defied, of technical processes going awry at exactly the right moment, and of the magic that happens when something unintended. The next 2000 1 cent USA coin today, as we dive into one of the most mind-blowing discoveries in the world of modern coin collecting, a story that has set the numismatic community on fire and continues to attract the curiosity of collectors, investors, and enthusiasts around the world, because today we are talking about the unbelievable case of a single 2000 1 cent coin said to be valued at an astonishing $17 million due to a combination of rare mint errors, extraordinary production anomalies, and circumstances so unusual that they elevate an ordinary penny into an object of extreme fascination. And as we explore this incredible claim, we will unfold all the possible reasons, mistakes, defects, misstrikes, die issues, and production mysteries that collectors speculate could make such a coin reach such a breathtaking value. Because while the typical 2000 Lincoln cent is one of the most common modern pennies ever made, produced in the billions at the Denver Mint, there exists the tantalizing possibility that an ultra-rare error coin slipped out of the mint during the year 2000, a coin that may have experienced multiple overlapping minting mistakes at once, turning it into something so rare that it becomes the stuff of legend, prompting discussions about what types of conditions could create such astronomical worth. And this leads us into an exploration of the various error categories that could theoretically push a 2000 cent into a valuation scenario that collectors describe as once in a lifetime, starting with the possibility of a dramatic off-metal strike, where the coin might have been accidentally struck on a planchet mint for another denomination, such as a dime planchet, a foreign coin planchet, or even an experimental test planchet used during transitional production phases. And because off-metal strikes are already highly sought after, the idea of a perfectly preserved, sharply detailed, and fully authenticated 2000 off-metal cent could send its value skyrocketing if paired with additional errors. And from there we consider another layer of value involving the possibility of a double denomination strike, where the coin may have been struck first as a cent and then mistakenly fed back into a press and struck again with the design of another coin, which is one of the rarest types of errors in American minting history. And if such a coin were also in pristine condition with exceptional eye appeal and immaculate surfaces, collectors would describe it as essentially priceless. And this potential is amplified when we imagine the possibility of a coin struck with reverse dies from another series, or perhaps a mule error, where the obverse of a cent could be paired with the reverse of a different coin, such as a dime or a commemorative design. Something that has happened only a handful of times in United States history, but every time such an error appears, it becomes instantly legendary, generating headlines, bidding, wars, and multi-million-dollar sales. And imagining such an extraordinary condition in a 2000 cent sparks the idea that maybe this hypothetical $17 million coin is not just a single error coin, but a compound error coin, meaning multiple mistakes layered together in one miraculous piece of metal that somehow escaped all levels of mint quality control. And as we picture this scenario, we also consider the numismatic allure of dramatic die breaks. Huge cuds, massive retained die, cracks, or catastrophic die failure, where the die practically collapses upon striking the coin, leaving enormous raised deformities on its surface, which create extremely visually striking patterns that collectors adore, especially when the errors are extreme, yet the strike remains strong and the design still identifiable, resulting in one of the rarest styles of collectible mint chaos. And this leads us into the discussion of struck-through errors, where foreign materials like grease, cloth, metal shavings, or even small stray objects accidentally find their way between the die and the planchet at the moment of striking, which can leave ghostly impressions, strange voids, missing elements, distorted lettering, or surreal textures across the coin. And although struck-through errors exist in many denominations, the idea of combining them with other major errors on the same 2000 cent adds another layer to the fantasy of how such a coin could reach such an extraordinary price. And then, we must not forget broad strikes, off-center strikes, multiple strikes, rotated dies, misaligned dies, and clipped planchets, all of which represent additional categories of errors collectors pursue. And in the hypothetical case of a $17 million 2000 penny, the attraction would come from a combination of several of these categories manifesting together in one impossible specimen. A coin that might have been struck with a rotated die at 40 degrees off alignment while simultaneously being struck off-center by 30%, with a double strike overlapping two misaligned impressions while also sitting on a planchet not intended for ascent. And as extreme as that sounds, error collectors thrive on such impossibilities because the more outrageous, dramatic, and visually stunning an error is, and the more impossible it seems, the more valuable it becomes. And in the theoretical world where such a coin exists, it would also need to be preserved in exceptional condition, perhaps graded at the highest levels by expert authentication services. Because the combination of an impossible error pattern with near-perfect preservation creates a numismatic storm that collectors call once in a century. And this level of rarity, desirability, and visual impact can push speculative values into the millions, especially if the coin has a story attached to it, such as being discovered in a sealed mint bag, a forgotten roll, or even in a circulation batch where someone casually finds it and later realizes they have stumbled upon one of the rarest modern cents ever imagined. And part of what makes the idea of a $17 million 2000 cents so fascinating is the simple fact that modern pennies are often overlooked, spent without thought, and ignored by millions of people every day. Yet within this ocean of common copper-plated zinc lies the extremely small possibility that a 1 in a billion error could exist, a coin whose existence defies the very quality control standards of the U.S. Mint, surviving by pure accident, traveling through the world until one lucky individual happens to notice something strange in its design, something off about the metal, the strike, the color, or the alignment, leading them to investigate further and ultimately uncover that what they assumed was a simple penny is actually a coin worth more than luxury homes, sports cars, or even entire collections of rare gold pieces. And a sheer drama of this possibility drives the imagination of collectors and fuels discussions about what types of errors might exist undiscovered, prompting treasure hunters to examine every detail of their loose change, especially coins from the year 2000, which already carries nostalgic value as a new millennium marker. And the idea of a rare error emerging from such a symbolic year adds emotional weight to the speculative value, creating a scenario where rarity meets symbolism, collector passion meets historical curiosity, and a modern cent transforms into a mythical treasure that people describe as a miracle of minting chaos. A perfect storm of errors that defies explanation, yet captivates everyone who hears the story. The next 1988 1 cent USA coin today, as we dive deep into one of the most astonishing and conversation-sparking stories in the world of rare coins. A story that captures imagination, inspires collectors, and highlights how a tiny piece of metal that most people walk past without a second thought can turn into an unbelievable treasure. And today we are exploring the fascinating case of a 1988 1-cent coin that some collectors speculate could be worth up to $17 million because of a complex combination of minting errors, production anomalies, extremely rare varieties, and unlikely circumstances that have transformed an ordinary Lincoln cent into the stuff of legend. So settle in as we break down the reasons behind its rumored value, the mistakes that make it special, and the possibilities hidden behind its simple copper-coated appearance. Beginning first with the understanding that the 1988 cent emerged during a transitional period at the United States Mint when several changes were taking place, from die redesigns to material consistency adjustments. And because of these transitions, unusual collector-grade varieties began appearing, some known and others discovered much later by numismatists who inspect every edge, every character, and every microscopic detail of the coin in search of anomalies that separate rare treasures from ordinary pocket change. And the 1988 cent is particularly compelling due to the famous 1988 reverse transition error, a variety where the obverse was paired with a reverse design intended for the 1989 cent, creating the 1988 with 1989 reverse, or R006 design mismatch. And this occurred because the Mint had begun producing new master hubs for the following year, and some dies apparently mixed during preparation, leading to coins struck with a reverse design 1 year ahead of schedule. A combination that should never have occurred, but did so in a small number of accidental production runs, resulting in a variety so rare that collectors hunt tirelessly for it. And although known examples sell for hundreds or even thousands, speculative narratives push the idea that an exceptionally pristine or unique specimen with additional errors on top of the transitional reverse could, in theory, reach astonishing values at auction, especially if such a coin were the only confirmed example of a compounded error, such as a double die obverse paired with a transitional reverse, off-center strike, broad strike, expansion, misaligned die pairing, or planchet contamination. And when collectors imagine all these rare anomalies combined in a single, flawless condition coin, the projected value escalates dramatically, leading to discussions claiming it could reach 8-figure valuations. And the fascination deepens when we consider the countless possibilities of minting errors, because coins pass through multiple stages during production, such as blank preparation, upsetting, striking, and ejection. And errors may occur at any of these phases for a variety of reasons, including die wear, mechanical misalignment, human oversight, or unexpected machine malfunction. And in the case of the 1988 cent, during a period of equipment transition, the probability of certain mismatched die varieties increases, giving rise to coins that are not merely off by a fraction, but fundamentally inconsistent with their intended design year. And collectors understand that these inconsistencies are more valuable when they are visually identifiable under magnification, such as the shape of the G in the designer's initials FG on the reverse, the thickness of the lettering, or the sharpness of the memorial steps. And the 1988 with the 1989 reverse variety is famous because of its distinct FG configuration, which differs noticeably from the intended 1988 reverse, making detection possible, yet difficult enough that only trained eyes can differentiate, which fuels the excitement among collectors who comb through rolls, bags, and inherited coin jars hoping for a discovery. And the narrative claiming a $17 million valuation thrives on the principle that the rarest possible version of a coin, when in flawless condition and exhibiting multiple layers of minting mistakes, becomes a collectible artifact rather than circulating currency, something so scarce that only 1 or 2 examples may exist in the entire world. Often called unicorn coins because they transcend typical numismatic boundaries. And such unique pieces can indeed sell for millions, as we've seen with other rare coins like the 1794 flowing hair dollar, the 1933 double eagle, and certain off-metal error cents from the 1940s. So applying this historical precedent to a hypothetical one-of-a-kind 1988 cent adds fuel to the idea that its value could skyrocket in the right circumstances. And collectors imagine the possibility of a coin struck on a bronze planchet instead of the zinc core used in that era, or struck on a foreign planchet accidentally fed into the press, or produced from a prematurely polished die that created unusual fields, or exhibiting clash marks that overlap with mismatched design elements, making it not only an error coin, but a multi-error marvel. And when we add the concept of perfect condition, such as a coin graded MS 70 by a professional grading service, The rarity multiplies even further because errors usually occur alongside damage or circulation wear, making pristine error coins extremely uncommon. And the idea that a single surviving example of a multi-error, transitional, wrong reverse, wrong planchet 1988 cent could exist is enough to make the collecting community theorize its hypothetical value in the millions, particularly when factoring in collector psychology, auction frenzy, historical significance, and the emotional allure of owning a coin that represents an extraordinary accident frozen in time, reminding us how unpredictable and fascinating minting history can be, as even a tiny mistake can produce something that outlives its era and becomes a legend among enthusiasts. And when enthusiasts talk about the possibility of this coin being worth $17 million, it is not because the standard 1988 cent holds that value, but because a theoretical. The next 1987 1 cent USA coin today, we are exploring the extraordinary case of an ordinary-looking 1987 1 cent coin that has become the stuff of legend, a coin that has stunned collectors, auction houses, and historians with the unbelievable idea that in rare circumstances, an unassuming penny from 1987 can skyrocket to an unimaginable value of $17 million. Not because of precious metals or low mintage, but because of a perfect storm of minting errors, mechanical misalignments, striking anomalies, planchet defects, and contextual peculiarities that transform what should be the simplest and most overlooked coin in circulation into a jaw-dropping treasure linked to an intricate web of possibilities, unusual mint conditions, and a series of subtle details that only the keenest eyes can detect. So let's begin this remarkable journey by exploring not only what makes the 1987 1 cent so fascinating, but why certain examples, extremely rare examples, can command astronomical prices due to a combination of errors that occur during production, errors so unusual that only a small fraction of 1987 cents exhibit them in ways dramatic enough to captivate the entire hobby. Because in order to appreciate why a coin like this can be worth $17 million, we must understand how the minting process works, how each stage introduces opportunities for mistakes, and how those mistakes mark the coin in ways that can elevate it from pocket change to a collectible that turns heads around the world. And the first major category of errors collectors look for in the 1987 penny revolves around the planchet, the blank piece of metal that becomes the coin, because in 1987 the United States Mint used copper-plated zinc planchets, which means the core was zinc with a thin copper coating. And during this era, any issue in the preparation of the planchet, such as insufficient plating, laminations, cracks, incomplete bonding, or improper thickness, could produce coins with dramatic appearances, including exposed zinc areas, bubbling, peeling layers, or distortions that catch the eye. And while most of these planchet flaws result in minor errors, one extreme variation known among collectors is the full planchet deformation error, where the zinc core shifts or expands in an unexpected direction during striking, causing the surface to warp and creating a unique texture or contour unlike any standard penny. And when such an error coincides with other notable mistakes, like double striking, off-center alignment, or die deterioration, the value compounds drastically. Because rarity is everything in the numismatic world, and a combination of rare errors on a single coin creates a once-in-a-lifetime piece that collectors will battle fiercely over, driving the price ever upward. And among the most sought-after 1987 cent anomalies is the double die error, a mistake caused when the engraved piece that presses the design onto the metal, shifts or duplicates during the hubbing process, creating doubled features on the finished coin, often seen on letters, numbers, or the portrait itself. And in the case of the extremely valuable 1987 penny, collectors report that some of the highest valued specimens show an ultra-rare form of dramatic doubling that affects not only the date, but also the lettering on both the obverse and reverse sides, creating a shadowed or duplicated look that is unmistakably distinct under magnification. And because dramatic, double dies are highly prized in the coin market, a 1987 example with severe doubling instantly commands enormous attention, especially considering that known examples from the 1980s tend to be far less extreme compared to famous double dies from earlier decades, which makes any intense 1987 doubling far rarer by comparison. But the story doesn't end with doubling, because another equally valuable category of mistakes includes misaligned strikes, where the die and planchet fail to line up perfectly during the strike, causing off-center designs, partial impressions, or distorted images. And for the 1987 penny, this can manifest in incredible ways, such as a portrait shifted heavily to one side, lettering disappearing off the rim, or Lincoln's bust stretching or compressing in unnatural proportions due to die misalignment or rotational errors where the obverse and reverse fail to align at exactly 180 degrees, making a coin appear twisted when flipped and while minor off-center. Strikes are fairly common. Those exceeding 50% off-center while still retaining a visible date are exceedingly rare, and if one of these also happens to contain a double die error, a planchet flaw, or a dramatic strike-through, where a foreign object like cloth, thread, grease, or metal shavings come between the die and the planchet, the result becomes a coin so unusual, so one-of-a-kind that auction houses treat it as a numismatic miracle. And such multi-error combinations are precisely what give rise to the fantastical $17 million valuation attached to certain extraordinary 1987 1 cents. Because collectors know that the odds of so many errors appearing together in a single coin are astronomically low, especially in a mintage that produced billions of standard pennies. And this rarity fuels intense demand among elite collectors who seek the most spectacular examples of minting mistakes, driving auction prices into territory that casual collectors might find hard to believe. But the value also depends heavily on condition because even the rarest error coins lose significant value if damaged, worn, or corroded. So discovering a high-grade 1987 error cent that survived decades without collecting scratches, dents, or discoloration is itself remarkable, further increasing desirability. And some of the most valuable examples reportedly come from original bank-wrapped rolls opened decades later, perfectly preserving coins that might have otherwise gone unnoticed and spent in everyday transactions. And this possibility is part of what drives excitement among coin hunters today, because the idea that a $17 million coin could be sitting unnoticed in an old jar, a forgotten drawer, or a dusty box of inherited change is irresistible, inspiring countless searches. And while not every unusual 1987 penny will be worth millions, the potential that some rare combination of doubling, off-center striking, planchet deformation, die cracks, cuts, clip planchets, or strike-through anomalies could create an unprecedented treasure keeps the hunt alive. And speaking of die cracks and cuts, these two are errors that appear when the die used to strike the coin becomes damaged, forming raised lines, broken edges, or missing sections in the design. And in the case of the most valuable 1987 pennies, collectors have noted examples where massive die cracks run dramatically across the coin, forming networks of raised ridges, or where large die cuts, chunks of missing die metal, create bold blobs or distortions along the rim, giving the coin a uniquely rugged appearance that is unmistakably mint-created. And because such dramatic die failures are relatively uncommon, especially in later decades when dies were more frequently replaced, any 1987 cent showing intense die damage becomes an exceptional find. But what truly elevates an error coin into ultra-high value territory is when several of these dramatic issues appear together. For example, a coin with both a severe double die and a major off-center strike, or a coin combining a full planchet lamination with a massive die cut, or a coin struck on the wrong planchet entirely, such as a foreign blank or an experimental test metal. And while wrong planchet errors are extremely rare for 1987 cents, they are not impossible, especially considering that the mint occasionally produced coins for foreign countries, meaning a blank of slightly different composition or thickness could theoretically find its way into the presses and create a coin unlike any other, instantly making it one of the rarest pieces ever discovered. And when one imagines the potential combination of wrong planchet composition, misalignment, doubling, strike-through, and die damage occurring on the same coin, it becomes clear how a single extraordinary specimen could command a price not merely in thousands or hundreds of thousands, but millions, tens of millions even, because collectors know that such a coin is statistically almost impossible, a once-in-history event. And the more impossible something seems in the minting world, the more valuable it becomes to those who seek the pinnacle of rarity. The next 1983 1 cent USA coin today, as we dive into one of the most astonishing stories in the world of rare coins, a story that captures the imagination of collectors, investors, and anyone fascinated by how a tiny everyday object can transform into a multi-million-dollar treasure. Because today we are exploring the extraordinary case of a 1983 1-cent coin. A coin you might easily overlook in your change, but one that in its rarest and most error-filled form has been valued by some collectors at an unbelievable $17 million. And in this journey, we will unravel how a coin minted in massive quantities could suddenly become one of the most sought-after pieces in numismatic history, driven not by its age or precious metal content, but by the bizarre and fascinating errors and mistakes that occurred during its production at the United States Mint. The kind of errors so unusual and so unlikely to be repeated that they elevate the coin from common pocket change to legendary status. And to truly understand why a 1983 1-cent coin could ever reach such astronomical value, we have to first understand the historical context of how these coins were made, why the year 1983 was special, and what sorts of minting mistakes can turn an ordinary coin into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Because 1983 came right after a major shift in U.S. 1-cent coin composition when in 1982, the mint transitioned from the long-used bronze alloy to a copper-plated zinc core, a change that brought with it a wave of transitional errors, die issues, planchet mistakes, and striking irregularities. And these mistakes created a perfect storm of opportunities for rare coins to emerge, including the extraordinary varieties that now command massive premiums on the collector market. And one of the reasons the 1983 1-cent coin became so intriguing is the possibility of transitional planchets, meaning coins struck on the wrong metal due to leftover blanks from the previous year. And while most 1983 cents are supposed to be copper-plated zinc weighing about 2.5 grams, some rare examples have been reported to show characteristics of the older bronze alloy at around 3.1 grams. And if authenticated, such a coin becomes instantly valuable because it represents a minting oversight few would ever expect. And collectors love these mistakes because they show how even the most carefully controlled minting environment sometimes allows anomalies to slip through. And another aspect that adds value is the potential for die errors, such as doubled dies, where the coin appears to have doubled lettering, numbers, or details due to a misalignment during the die creation process. And the 1983 double die reverse variety is already famous for its dramatic doubling on the word 1 cent in the United States of America inscription, making even modestly preserved examples worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. But imagine combining such a high-profile double die with other errors, like off-metal planchets, broad strikes, clipped planchets, or misaligned dies, creating a coin so unique that no other example exists. The kind of coin that collectors call a holy grail, the kind of coin that could be auctioned for millions simply because of its singularity and historical importance. And the possibility of a multi-error coin from 1983 is not far-fetched, given the transitional chaos occurring in the minting facilities at the time, where machinery adjustments, metal changes, leftover blanks, and high production demands all made the environment ripe for unexpected outcomes. And when you consider how rare it is for multiple errors to combine perfectly on one surviving coin, you understand why the value skyrockets. Because rarity is everything in numismatics. And rarity born from mistakes is even more alluring, as each error tells a story of human oversight, mechanical unpredictability, and the fascinating vulnerability of an industrial system designed to produce uniformity. And when a coin breaks through that uniformity, it becomes a time capsule that captures a moment of imperfection frozen in metal. And these imperfect beauties often become priceless, especially when collectors suspect that only one or two examples exist. And once a coin reaches that mythic level, its value is determined not only by its physical traits, but also by the intensity of collector demand, the historical narrative surrounding it, and the willingness of wealthy investors to compete for ownership. And this is exactly how 1983 1-cent coin could theoretically reach a value of $17 million. Because imagine a coin that not only contains a transitional planchet error, but also displays a bold double die reverse, along with a striking anomaly, such as a partial brockage, a broad strike, a rotated die, or even strike through debris that leaves a dramatic impression on the coin. And then pair all of that with pristine preservation, perhaps surviving in a near mint or uncirculated state despite all odds. And suddenly you have a coin unlike any other, a coin so desirable that collectors and investors would push auction prices to unimaginable heights. And this possibility excites the numismatic world because such coins are not minted deliberately. They're accidents of history, occurrences that are nearly impossible to replicate and therefore incredibly valuable. And when the story spreads that a single 1983 cent possessing multiple rare errors surfaced and was evaluated by top grading services as authentic and unique, it becomes no surprise that bidding wars could erupt, driving a humble penny to a value greater than luxury cars, houses, or even private islands, showing just how powerful collector psychology can be when scarcity and significance collide. And even though millions of 1983 cents exist, the overwhelming majority are completely ordinary, making the outliers even more special. And what adds to the excitement is the number of error types that could be present, such as off-center strikes where the design appears shifted, die cracks forming raised lines across the surface, cuds where part of the die has broken away, creating a missing design segment, or feet or finger strikes, leaving random impressions. And each of these errors has its own collector following. So a combination of them could elevate the value even further, especially if the coin demonstrates dramatic visual appeal that immediately catches the eye of experts. And beyond the errors themselves, another reason this coin can command extraordinary value is the mystique surrounding rare finds in circulation. Because people love the idea that a multi-million-dollar treasure could be hiding in a pocket, a drawer, or a small jar of saved change, and stories of unbelievable discoveries drive more people to search, which strengthens demand and elevates market prices for verified examples. And this cycle of excitement, discovery, rarity, and demand forms the perfect foundation for jaw-dropping auction results. And while not every 1983 cent is worth more than face value, the rarest error varieties prove that in the world of numismatics, even the smallest coin can become an international sensation, inspiring collectors to keep searching and reminding everyone that mistakes, when preserved in the right moment, can become masterpieces worth millions. And that is the incredible power and allure of the 1983 1-cent coin that some believe could reach the dazzling price of $17 million. The next 2004 1-cent USA coin today, as we dive into one of the most astonishing and captivating stories in the world of rare coins, a story that blends mystery, minting mistakes, collector obsession, and the extraordinary possibility that an ordinary-looking 2004 1-cent coin might actually be worth an unbelievable $17 million. So settle in and get ready, because what we're about to explore goes far beyond the typical tales of coin collecting and reaches into the realm of numismatic legends, where a tiny sliver of metal struck with unexpected flaws can transform from pocket change into a prized treasure that collectors dream about finding in their pocket, their old jars at home, or maybe even in the most unexpected places. And as we unravel the bizarre journey of this 2004 penny said to possess a combination of errors, anomalies, freak minting accidents, and lucky coincidences that push its value into the millions, you'll discover how the smallest imperfections, the subtlest mechanical slips during production, and the rarest alignment faults can converge into something so desirable that top-tier collectors, auction houses, and wealthy enthusiasts would compete fiercely, driving its price sky high. And that is exactly where our story begins, because the 2004 1-cent coin is not typically known for major errors in circulation. Yet the possibility of a freak batch created by an unlikely chain of events at the mint, involving die deterioration, off-metal strikes, misaligned dies, double-struck impressions, plancha contamination, and unexpected variations in pressure and timing, open the door to a handful of coins escaping into circulation, carrying characteristics that no ordinary penny should have, characteristics that change everything about its identity and ultimately its value. And when a coin develops multiple errors stacked together rather than just one simple flaw, the combination effect scales its rarity exponentially, making it not just unusual, but nearly impossible to replicate. And collectors know that when something is nearly impossible, its value jumps in ways that defy logic. So the thought of even one surviving 2004 penny containing layers of mistakes instantly started whispers in the coin community. Whispers that grew louder over time as enthusiasts debated whether such a coin could exist, whether it had already been found, or whether it was still hiding somewhere waiting to be discovered by a lucky person who might not even understand the treasure, sitting in the palm of their hand. And this idea alone has mesmerized collectors because the speculative possibility of a $17 million penny is powerful enough to trigger a movement, a hunt, a craze, inspiring people to look more closely at their coins, to scrutinize every ridge, every letter, every edge, every subtle inconsistency, hoping to uncover something extraordinary lurking beneath what appears on the surface to be an ordinary copper-plated zinc cent. But the intrigue comes from the strange details that experts have theorized could belong to this coin, starting with a potential off-metal strike, where the penny might have been accidentally struck on a foreign planchet or a leftover blank mint for another denomination. Something that should not have happened in a modern minting process, yet occasionally does when machinery fails to clear and use planchets or when human oversight and timing errors intersect, and such a mistake would immediately launch the coin into a rare category, because a 2004 penny struck on the wrong metal could show unexpected weight variations, different resonance when tapped, unusual coloration beneath the copper plating, or even metallurgical inconsistencies visible under X-ray fluorescence testing, all of which create an irresistible mystery. But that is only the beginning of what might make this hypothetical coin so valuable, because some versions of the story suggest that the coin may have been double struck in a rotated position, meaning it received two separate impressions not perfectly aligned, leaving ghost-like outlines of the original design shifted at odd angles, resulting in an eerie duplicate profile of Lincoln or overlapping lettering that looks almost supernatural. And in the world of error coins, rotated double strikes can fetch massive sums even when they occur on ordinary dates. So imagine the frenzy if such an error combined with an off-metal strike on the same exact coin. And then imagine pairing that with misaligned dies that create uneven pressure across the coin, resulting in thick rims in some areas and abnormally thin or weakly struck zones in others, giving the coin strange slopes, unusual shadows, and irregularities that the average person would overlook, but that experts would recognize instantly as minting anomalies. And then we add yet another layer: the possibility of die cracks and die breaks forming odd raised lines across the coin, patterns that resemble lightning bolts or fractures and are created when the minting dies themselves begin to deteriorate under heavy use, causing the design to warp and deform in specific areas. And many collectors actively seek dramatic die cracks. But when combined with other major errors on a single coin, their rarity multiplies, and the value does too. And this theory suggests that a freak series of events allowed all these errors to occur on one coin before it escaped unnoticed into circulation, possibly spending years exchanging hands for groceries, candy, or gas without anyone ever realizing that they held something priceless. But eventually someone might have spotted it, maybe in loose change or in a coin roll, and their sharp eyes might have picked up one of the odd features. And that moment of curiosity could have unlocked the chain of discovery that led experts to examine it under magnification, documenting each bizarre feature, each mechanical irregularity, each freak coincidence, eventually declaring it one of the most complex error coins ever found, so unique that it could not be duplicated and so historically significant that it deserved a valuation in the millions. And auction houses know that when something is one of one with layered errors that defy probability, wealthy collectors will drive the price up without hesitation, chasing prestige and bragging rights. And that is how the 2004 penny gained legendary status, transforming from a humble cent into an object of fascination. And this fascination grows even greater when considering the possibility of mis-strikes involving transitional planchets, which occur when a mint changes metal compositions and leftover planchets from previous years accidentally get reused, creating hybrid coins that technically do not belong to any official year or composition. And while 2004 was not a transitional year, mints have extremely complex internal environments where batches of planchets, dies, and machinery sometimes overlap, especially in late-night shifts or periods of high-speed production. So theories emerge about a possible leftover planchet from a previous experiment or an off-denomination blank getting mixed into the 2004 batch. And if such a hybrid error occurred, the coin's composition would not match its declared year, instantly making it a numismatic anomaly of the highest order. And rare anomalies like this have historically sold for tens of thousands or millions depending on condition, provenance, and uniqueness. And now imagine pairing that anomaly with multiple strike errors, die cracks, rim distortions, off-center alignment, and a second or third strike rotated in ways that produce ghostly design shadows, and then layer on the possibility of a partial blockage, where another coin becomes stuck between the dies during the strike, leaving mirrored, distorted impressions on one side of the coin. A feature that already fascinates collectors because brockages are unusual and visually striking. And now consider how an overlapping brockage combined with earlier described anomalies would make the coin something so impossibly rare that even the top experts could barely categorize it. And when experts cannot categorize something easily, its uniqueness skyrockets its value, creating the foundation of a legend. The last 1996 1-cent piece, a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors and investors alike due to its mind-boggling valuation of $17 million. And before we jump into the fascinating intricacies that make this coin worth such an astronomical sum, let me set the stage for why this seemingly ordinary penny, the kind that might jingle unnoticed in your pocket or sit quietly in a jar at home, has transformed into a numismatic legend. First and foremost, it is essential to understand that coins achieve extraordinary value not merely because they are old or rare in a conventional sense, but because they embody a confluence of factors that make them unique in ways that few other coins can match. And the 1996 penny is a quintessential example of this phenomenon, beginning with the errors and mistakes that distinguish it from the millions of pennies minted in the same year. The most notorious of these errors lies in the production process itself, which was executed at a time when the U.S. Mint was grappling with mechanical anomalies in the coining presses, human oversight, and subtle flaws in the die design, all of which culminated in variations so rare that they have become the cornerstone of the coin's value. Collectors know that the presence of doubling on the date and on the lettering, known in numismatic terms as a double die error, is not just a minor cosmetic detail, but a feature that can multiply the value of a coin exponentially. And in the case of the 1996 penny, this doubling is not just slight, but pronounced enough to create a visual impression that is immediately noticeable to a trained eye, capturing the interest of seasoned collectors who understand that the rarity of such errors directly correlates with market value. But beyond the double die, there are subtle misalignments in the relief of the coin, where the design elements are not perfectly centered. And in some specimens, there is evidence of die cracks, small fissures in the steel die used to strike the coins, which leave tiny but highly collectible imperfections on the surface. Each die crack is unique, and when combined with other anomalies, it transforms a common penny into a one-of-a-kind collectible. Moreover, some of these 1996 pennies exhibit what is called off-center strikes, where the image of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse or the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse is slightly shifted from its intended position. This misalignment, though minor to the untrained eye, creates a rarity factor that collectors prize. And when you consider that only a handful of these off-center examples were released into circulation, it becomes clearer why a coin that originally cost a mere cent could escalate to a value in the millions. In addition to physical anomalies, there are also variations in the metal composition that have contributed to the coin's value. During 1996, the U.S. Mint experimented subtly with the copper plating and zinc core proportions, resulting in some pennies with slight tonal differences, subtle color shifts, and density variations that can only be confirmed through careful inspection or metallurgical testing. These compositional deviations are exceedingly rare and highly sought after because they provide a tangible record of the minting process and of the minute mistakes that can occur in large-scale coin production. Beyond these technical and physical factors, the provenance and documented history of certain coins has added to their astronomical value. Some 1996 pennies with verified error documentation have passed through the hands of prominent collectors, auction houses, and grading authorities, each transaction adding to the historical narrative and thus inflating the coin's perceived and actual market worth. The story of a coin's journey from the mint to a collector's album or an auction block can itself create a mystique that elevates value exponentially. And when combined with the inherent rarity created by production mistakes, the 1996 1-cent piece becomes not just a coin, but a symbol of the delicate intersection between human error, industrial process, and the collector's passion. Furthermore, the numismatic community places immense emphasis on the condition or grade of the coin, and a single 1996 penny that exhibits these errors in pristine, uncirculated condition can command a price many times higher than one that shows minor wear. Grading services such as PCGS or NGC provide authentication, and assigned grades that can make the difference between a coin being worth a few $1,000s versus the eye-watering $17 million valuation. Every scratch, every mark, every slight imperfection, or the absence thereof, can influence collector perception and the willingness of buyers to invest at extraordinary levels. Additionally, psychological factors come into play. The allure of owning a coin so rare that it has achieved legendary status within the collector's universe fuels competitive bidding, as enthusiasts and investors alike recognize that opportunities to acquire such anomalies are virtually non-existent. Scarcity, combined with documented error and perfect preservation, creates the ideal conditions for exponential market inflation. And it is precisely this combination that has transformed the 1996 penny from a simple unit of currency into a multi-million-dollar treasure. The coin embodies the broader narrative of how minor imperfections can turn ordinary objects into extraordinary collectibles, highlighting human fascination with rarity, error, and historical significance. And while the average person might overlook a single penny on the street, within the numismatic world, every detail counts. Every die crack tells a story, and every minute variation can signal the presence of a coin that is potentially worth more than the sum of all its nominal counterparts. Even the tiniest differences in strike depth, metal hue, and design alignment are meticulously cataloged, studied, and sought after, which collectively explains how a 1996 1-cent coin, initially minted to facilitate everyday transactions, has evolved into one of the most coveted and expensive coins ever recorded. This astonishing valuation is a testament to the profound effect that errors and mistakes can have in transforming ordinary objects into priceless artifacts. It is also a celebration of the meticulous attention collectors pay to subtle details, the lengths they will go to authenticate and preserve these items, and the way human curiosity and desire for unique objects can inflate market value to mind-bending levels. And as we explore further, it becomes evident that the coin's value is not only a product of physical and historical anomalies, but also of social and cultural dynamics within the collecting community, including the propagation of stories, auction results, and the creation of legends around specific coins. The more people talk about, study, and compete for such coins, the more entrenched and reinforced their high valuation becomes. In this sense, the 1996 penny functions as a case study in how rarity, error, and human fascination intersect to produce financial phenomena that are seemingly disproportionate to the object's intrinsic material value. In essence, the coin's $17 million price tag is as much about psychology, storytelling, and human desire as it is about copper, zinc, and die imperfections, and it illustrates a broader principle in collectibles and investment-grade items. When an object is rare, flawed in an interesting way, and historically significant, the market often responds with valuations that transcend conventional logic, adding to the mystique and allure of owning something that few others will ever possess. Moreover, the 1996 penny exemplifies how errors that might have been considered failures by the mint or unnoticed at the time of production can, over decades, become celebrated hallmarks of authenticity and uniqueness. In other words, what was once a mistake is now the coin's most prized feature, and every die flaw, misstrike, and compositional irregularity contributes to the narrative of value that collectors, investors, and historians have come to revere. As we consider all these factors together, the technical anomalies, the graded condition, the scarcity, the provenance, the cultural fascination, and the psychological dynamics, it becomes clear that the 1996 1-cent coin is not merely a coin, but a phenomenon, a tangible representation of how human error, chance, and desire can converge to create something both materially and financially extraordinary. And this convergence explains why the coin has achieved the staggering $17 million valuation, transforming a piece of everyday currency into a coveted artifact that exemplifies the very essence of numismatic passion, historical curiosity, and market dynamics.